can go through back issues and get caught up.
Okay.
What time are we?
24 after. Okay.
Oh, there's
Or not.
maybe one more chair.
Jill and Greg are bringing a couple of chairs.
Oh, it's a BYOC.
Yeah.
Closing your eyes and going within. Let us expand our minds out and think back over all of history. Thinking of the grand evolutionary cycles that thousands of years ago the yogis were talking about in terms of human evolution and the cycles of time. And that there were definite aspects to the quickening of evolution. And we start as simple consciousness within inorganic matter, minerals, rock, mountain. And as consciousness continues, we then come into what is organic type of matter. Plants, trees, bushes, sense of movement, sense of growth, sense of life energy flowing through in a way that didn't happen in the mineral and rock. And as consciousness continued to evolve and we were ready, we then experienced animal. We had movement from one place to another. The senses began to open more so that we could perceive this world through sight, feeling, touch, sound, smell. And gradually, we entered into a human evolution. Meher Baba said, by the time we reach a human evolution, we're 90% of the way there. Imagine that. And in the beginning, the animalistic aspects were predominant. Survival of the fittest. Competition on that level. But then gradually, consciousness evolved. It changed. There was love for family, loyalty. Gradually, that could expand to include a community, a village, a township, cooperation, division of labor, complexity of mind began to grow and evolve. And then one day, some awakening happened. An awakening that took us beyond just simply living in this world, accepting what the senses presented to us as real. Some deep inner spiritual experience, an awakening happened. And we were aware that there is something more than what just included in the five senses. There's a consciousness, there's an intelligence, there's a power that transcended the individual human or animal, vegetable or rock. As those experiences became more and more frequent, the consciousness evolved into another step, that of the aspirant. One who desired to know what was beyond these five senses. What was the substrata of consciousness and power that it had occasionally sensed in a supersensory, superconscious level. And then bringing us to the point where we are at now. And dedicating ourselves to a particular path, to a journey of going within and finding out what is more, what is higher. And yet it is a combat, it is a struggle. It goes back and forth. The human within seeks to hold us to the body, to the earth, to what is known. The divine spark within seeks to expand beyond. And back and forth we go. until finally, we come to the point, Master, Papa, of Mother, where there's an absolute knowledge that nothing else will do but the fullest realization. And when that comes, we dedicate ourselves, heart, mind, and soul, single-heartedly, single-mindedly. And whether it is your own experience or whether you're thinking of Master, or Papa, or Mother, you think of zooming toward higher consciousness, being immersed in the divine, feeling the bliss, the joy, the expansion of love, to include all creation. The wisdom that begins to illuminate your mind. You transfer from being a son of man to a son of God. Transformation becomes complete. Illumination is now yours. Not occasionally, not sporadically, but continuously, joyfully. You are now successful at that last and greatest stage of evolution. So, Master writing about the quickening of human evolution. And in the yoga psychology of consciousness, there are different aspects of the brain that are talked about. There is the manas, and one way of describing the manas is anything that an animal could conceive of, that kind of reasoning that an animal can do, perception in the world, not too much anticipation of the future, living pretty much in the present, living pretty much in relationship to the sensory world that it sees and experiences. And that is the definition of the manas. And then there is the buddhi. And the buddhi is the frontal lobe action. And it is the higher reasoning mind. It can do abstractions. It can think about the future and the past. It can do mathematics and other kinds of things that require something other than a direct sensory experience of something. So the buddhi then can be in a human reasoning kind of state. A high academic standard can be that buddhi. But then at some point, the buddhi becomes illumined, becomes awakened. There are rays that come from the divine intelligence, and that is when you have an experience inside that is beyond your own intelligence. You haven't reasoned it out. You haven't necessarily read about it or thought about it. Suddenly, an entire experience comes to you, and you know the truth of it. That is an illumination of the buddhi. And as the buddhi begins to become more and more dominant, there are higher centers within the brain, the 1,000-petal lotus, that begins to awaken inside. You can feel the life energy, the prana, scintillating through all the various nerves, and you feel that there's this unfolding going on in the brain. And there are different centers than what normally goes on within the brain. They feel vitally divine in their contact. The intelligence that streams to you comes from a higher intelligence. And this is the next stage in evolution. When you see pictures of the Buddha, for instance, have a statue at home, and he has 3 rings that are smaller and smaller as they go up, and then there's a spire at the top. And the 3 rings represent the 3 stages of consciousness: the material body in the first stage, the astral or the electrical in the next stage, and the causal or the idea in the third stage. And then the spire going straight up out of that is transcending all three of those and going into pure spirit. So these are all indicative of human evolution and going, as Mother would say, from the human to the divine. From the human to the divine. And as she would also say, she was both human and divine. So it's not as if you're like a tadpole that drops off the tail and you're no longer the tail at all. And you maintain the tail in the sense that you maintain a human body. You maintain a human experience on a certain level, but you also become divinely illumined. And so Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, and other great ones, they had that dual nature. They were both human and they were divine. So while we talk about the death of the ego, the death of the human inside, all of that has a certain validity to it. But once the transcendence is made, then there's a union of the two. And clearly the divine is superior to the human. But the human has a value. We wouldn't be able to relate to people of this world in this material plane if you didn't maintain some human connection. So you have that, and it's being illumined, it's being inspired by the divine consciousness within you. So reading a little bit from Master here. Man is a rational spiritual animal. In the beginning of his life, he is mostly engrossed in his instinctive animal appetites. That is why children are mostly animal-like in early life. Excuse me. They pass time in eating, digging, fidgeting, and frolicking, frisking here and there without any purpose, just like the animals. And sometimes we can think that's a little envious to be able to just frolic around a bit as an animal. There are many human automatons who never grow up mentally. So we know people who, they just simply live for the moment. They don't learn from their experience. They don't grow in that sense. And oftentimes they have shorter lives because they just are not anticipating kind of the higher aspects of life at all. They're just living for the moment, and as a result, they have very, very limited intelligence and experience. Such people, though, they are 50 or older, don't possess the mind of a really intelligent child at the age of 2 years. So this is kind of the first stage, you might say, of what consciousness goes through. And one of the things that God showed me once was that one of the purposes for the Kali Yuga, this downward turn in the cycle, and we've just come out of a Kali Yuga. It's an age of darkness. It's a twilight period in which it's very easy for the animal consciousness to make the next step into human consciousness. And so greed, appetite, driven by greed and appetite and things like that, very animalistic, and because it has even greater reason than animals do, it can become even more degraded than animals do. And so that happens at this lower end. And then there's a gradual ascension. And as the years and the decades and the millennia go by, there's a quickening of that evolution, and people become more refined in their consciousness. The notion of right and wrong become much more highly attuned, so that you just wouldn't take something of somebody else's. It just would never enter into your mind. That's just the basic given. That there's a certain attunement to truth, to higher life, to light. That gets more and more sway as we work up toward the golden age. And in that golden age, people in general are much more highly attuned to divine consciousness. It just comes easier. If you can imagine all the rock stars and others, if they were all very dedicated to the path, that became the in thing. That became the cool thing, is to spiritually advance. You can see how far we have to go in this worldly condition that we're in today. And to find that quickening happening within the entire civilization. So now, if you're seeking out spiritual evolution, there's something usually more of an oddity than what's common. Most people are just very focused on getting by in life. Doesn't make them bad people, not at all. But they just don't think of much greater than that. If they go to church, they mostly think, I'll have this life here on earth, and then I'll continue on into heaven afterwards. And heaven is just a little better version than what I have here, but it's kind of basically the same. And life will continue in that way. It's just bad people won't be around, and other people will agree with me. And so life will be better. And so but it's an extension of this material plane into a little bit more refined kind of plane. There's not really a thought of what it would take to be in the bliss of God, to be in the light of God, to have that illumination. One time in my deep meditation, I had angels come into my vision, and we're told about angels singing, strumming around on harps and sitting around on clouds. And Master one time said, my God, how boring that would be, sitting on a cloud strumming a harp all the time. He was into a much more dynamic kind of a heaven than that. But that, it wasn't just singing, it was bliss in the form of vibration that was emanating through these great spiritually illumined beings. And it wasn't just bliss, but it was illumined consciousness. And they were sitting at the feet of God or at the throne of God. They were right in the center of that tremendous power and light and bliss. And it was not boring, not at all. It was filled with life and illumination and growth. And this is one thing that, as long as we keep any kind of individuality, we keep growing. We keep growing. So we move out of this animalistic kind of form, and we start looking at what intuition is. And most all of us have had an experience of God in one form or another. Sometimes it's in a crisis. Sometimes it just comes as an experience to us. And it's so clearly different than anything else that we've ever experienced before. And we know that it's different. It's undeniably different. Now, some people will just gradually go back to sleep, so to speak. It won't really inspire them to waken up. It takes perhaps a number of these kinds of experience over lifetimes before the intelligence catches up with that illumined experience. But when it comes, suddenly it's like the scales fall off your eyes, and you see this world in a brand new way. It offers tremendous opportunity. It's like all the things that we have been taught just turn to straw, just turn to dust at that point. And this brand new world opens up. Now, we may not live in that world 100%. It may be a remembered experience, but it's a remembered experience that changes us and changes our orientation so that we really begin to sincerely seek something greater, something higher in our lives. So this is the form that evolution takes. And just thinking of your own life, your own consciousness, your own battles, your own struggles, the back and forth that goes on within life, those two opposing forces. Just thinking about evolution, and that evolution is this stream that is carrying us all along. And right now, it's not running strong for the entirety of humanity, but one day it can, and one day it will. But right now, you feel it, you experience it, and yet we have these oppositional forces that are working against us. And so we go back and forth. But thinking of your life, of your intelligence, of your consciousness in these evolutionary terms, thinking really big picture, and seeing how humanity has gone through a number of cycles and how we've entered into this upward cycle. And what that means for us individually, what that means for us collectively. And when you look out in this world and you see other people and they're living their lives, they're doing their thing, And being able to see them through this concept, through this view of evolution, and seeing people at various stages of evolution. And you see people who are just salt of the earth, very basic, can be good-hearted people, but just live for the moment. And then you see others who are striving with higher values, expanded vision, compassion for a greater number of people. And then as you move forward, you see fewer and fewer perhaps, but you see people filled with compassion, filled with love, and a real desire for God, a real desire for illumination. So you see yourself in that proud procession, as Khalil Gibran says, all marching towards the infinite. It's quite a grand picture, isn't it? It's a beautiful picture. It's a wonderful thing. And as Mother said, when you're pioneers, sometimes you look to your left and your right, there's nobody else around you, because that's the nature of being a pioneer, isn't it? But it's also exciting. It's paving the way. It's going in places that most of humanity have not gone. Not in this cycle, at least. So it's a wonderful thing, and you can help to quicken the evolution of humanity through our own spiritual effort. As Jesus said, and if I be lifted up, shall lift up all humanity with me. Because we're all connected. And just like if we're connected by a chain, and you lift up one link of that chain, all the other links are lifted up along with it. So one transformed life, one changed life, changes another, and so on. And it all begins to lift it up. And what you see in your own lifetime in terms of the change within humanity, it may be just a little small piece compared to the entire effect of it. You look at the end of life for Jesus, doesn't look like much. Looks like he was kind of a failure. All of his disciples ran away. And he's killed, and in a very ugly, vicious kind of way. He's humiliated. Doesn't look like much. But look at the effect that life has had on this world. So with that as an introduction, and thinking about evolution, your own, in this world, and any way that you engaged with it in this last month, what did they? How did the week go? How did the month go? I'll turn it over to you.
I was thinking, since it's been 2 months, I had time to think about this. And I was doing my meditation and thinking, and God showed me, how like natives, they make out of reeds these little placemats or whatever, right? And they fold them up. And he showed me not all my lives, but all these different lives. And here in the center was God, and this is my evolution here. But there's God, and then around it wrapped is all these different lives. Okay, over here, and it's making a pattern, and there's no edges, there's no boundaries, but it just keeps going. And I'm like, okay, what about now? And where am I? What am I doing now? And I'm actually a part of it all at the same time right now, although I'm more conscious that there is that God center. I wasn't always conscious there was the God center. And so that the consciousness of what I am able to be is there.
Great.
Yeah, so that was kind of my 2 months.
Wonderful. And that weaves all of your existences in together then, and then God at the center of it.
Yeah.
How does that change you then? That concept, that revelation. And because generally we see, if we get some insight, particularly if there's a difficult past life or something like that, it can be disturbing and distressing to us. And so just that vision of seeing them all connected, God is at the center, you're part of all of that. How does that change you in your relationship to all of those existences?
Oh my gosh, that just wiped away the shame. I mean, literally wiped it away.
Mhm.
I was amazed. I mean, me, and you know me, I getting up in front of people and talking, I
Mhm.
mean, my voice would usually go away and I couldn't do it.
Mhm.
But I got up and talked to people and afterwards I'm like, wow, I did that.
Yeah.
I didn't even feel anything,
Uh-huh.
any shame, any fear, and so seeing that this horrible person, because I was a horrible person, is part of that, part of who I am, and this wonderful glowing person who I was before
Mhm.
is it's all together.
Mhm.
And it's not like a dead plant leaf that they cut off. It's almost like a living, you know, like living bridges, and you know, okay, it's almost like that. So
Yeah.
it's a living thing.
Yes.
And so that was, I mean, and I just am. It isn't like I am this or I am that. I just
Mhm.
am.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I did a little happy dance after I after I went outside. I'm like, woo, I did that.
I was going to say, when you said you didn't feel nothing, and I know what you mean, you didn't feel any of the negative
Right.
things. But I don't think it really was nothing, was it?
No.
And we're not used to, if it's not a bad thing, we're not used to acknowledging it in some way. So I know language is sometimes a hard thing to come up with, but is there a description of how you did feel? You did the happy dance. and
Afterwards, yeah, when I went.
How about when you were doing it?
So it sounds kind of weird, but actually, what it felt like is like there's people out there in front of me, right?
Mhm.
And I was just like, okay, that's me, and that's me, and that's me, and I mean, it was a connection. Not that's me, but it was a connection instead of oh my gosh, they're judging me.
Yeah.
You know.
You're in the spotlight, and they're all thinking the worst.
Right, and looking for ways to get me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. It's been a long journey.
It's been a
hasn't it?
long journey. Oh my gosh, it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled. Just thrilled.
That's a big step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. From the human to the divine.
Well, I don't know, from scared human to human.
Well, that expansion of consciousness, seeing yourself in others and being able to do it in real time. It's not just something you're trying to think about and imagine. And it's a genuine experience in the moment. That is a divine consciousness. So it's important to be able to recognize it when it happens. It's not a thing of ego. In fact, if anything, we feel humbled by it when it happens. Mm-hmm. Who else?
Well, this was a big assignment, I thought, and I kind of went all over with it. But it seems that since I've been on the spiritual path, it's just like, you know, when you speak about ever new joy, it's this ever new awakening. Just keep waking up into greater and greater consciousness all the time. Just keep growing, and you know, I went from that to then talk about the meditation and what brings you closer to God. And sometimes I can't meditate. I just sit and just like meditate, and then coast. And then go back to meditating again.
Uh-huh.
But the coasting is okay. I've accepted that instead of just feeling like I have to meditate because this is what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
The coasting is okay.
So tell me, how do you define meditating?
That's when I can actually sit and just really shut everything off and just really go inside. And it comes easy sometimes, and everything kind of is very still. And there's the God contact. Sometimes there's revelations of some sort or insights into things.
And when you're coasting?
You know, that's nice too. Yeah. that's more like just maybe reading something inspirational, like the Bible, and then focusing on that and thinking about that, and how it applies to my life. So it's more of thinking about things instead of shutting everything down to do meditation. But it's also very nice.
Yeah, it's interesting, the idea of shutting everything down versus awakening to something new.
Yeah.
It's an interesting difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wonder if that feeds into what makes it difficult. If it feels like a shutting down, and I know what you mean, you're shutting down
Yeah.
the things of the
closing
world
my
and
eyes and the
senses and things like
sounds.
that.
Yeah.
But if it was an opening to something, something that's always been there, always is
Oh, it's
there.
always there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just wondering if that would be a useful change of terminology. That when you sit, you're sitting to awaken to what is, to what already is. You don't have to do anything in particular.
Yeah.
And maybe if it's sitting and you just feel an inspiration, okay, today I'm going to pick up a book and I'm going to read with that for a while, and then I'm just going to set the book down, and now I'm just moving quietly more inward, and just a gentle redefinition around meditation and being absorbed in that. So just more and more and more, just feeling that absorption into the divine, feeling engulfed, just in whatever state of mind you're in at the time. Okay. So relating that to evolution, then, how would you, or does it?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at where I was, I mean, in my entire life, I mean, I feel like my relationship with God is deeper and more intimate, and continues to grow that way. And it's more, in some ways, it's more private and personal and big, and that in other ways, it's something that I feel I can share with other people. Just and not by talking about God, but just by being, and just looking at somebody, just smiling at somebody. You feel like you're transferring some of that love to them.
Yeah. Great. That's a good definition of evolution.
Just feels like things are sort of getting closer, and if you imagine life as being in a long tunnel, it's still a really long way, but it's at least a straight tunnel, and you can see the little tiny dot at the end. As opposed to it used to be a twisting tunnel, so you were just in the dark making steps and feeling your way down. And it's been an interesting few months, feeling like I had to really professionally defend myself or be eaten. And that feels like that's moving past that I can start to relax and don't have to be always on the alert. And to find God in that peace again. Meditation's been really tough to try to have the mind quiet down finally and move that away. It feels so wonderful there's like Saturday, so I was like, I'm relaxed. And I was like, wait, I'm actually relaxed right now. I haven't felt that for a long time. That's very nice.
Mhm.
I think the evolution of the world, I'm real encouraged because I think there's lots of panic and fear mongering. But when you look at the kind of the big evidence, there's so much more kind of institutional caring and what was once the Middle Ages and taken as standard is now, absolutely abhorrent, and every, culture sort of rise up against it, and just feeling some of that, and just little things of being in meetings and have colleagues that feel like, they're all out to get us, but going, no, that was just a fun meeting. We were figuring out how to partner and work together,
Right.
and have such different takes, and really feel that partnering and joy is spreading farther these days, not
Great.
so much the society as a whole, as everyone for themselves, they're feeling the benefit of joy and partnering and love.
Yeah.
And hopeful.
I'm encouraged as well. The news makes a business at selling bad news. And remember when I was going to my parents who lived in a small town, and I looked at the little newspaper there, and I'd say 80% of the news was good news. It's about the local high school sports team, who was on the honor roll, who got Boy Scout, who was homecoming queen, just, it was all good stuff. Then there's the police blotter who got arrested for urinating in public, and all that kind of stuff. And that's been turned on its head so much today, where it's all bad news. And I think oftentimes we lose sight of how many good people there are who are trying to do the right thing, essentially. And I think there's lots of reason for hope in this world, and evidence that things have changed. Your initial statements around reminded me of a movement from being in a beware state, beware, to being into an aware state. And in the beware, we're always defensive. We're always, who's out after me, and maybe trying to get aggressive with somebody else before they do with us. That's a defense, but it's very much who's out there who's trying to harm me, and the antenna and everything. The aware state is much more neutral. It can still recognize dangers when it comes, but that it's just simply aware. And it's not putting that overlay on of who's my enemy and who's out to get me. And that's part of our evolutionary course, I think, is the beware is the animalistic side. Is that a wolf? Is that a bear? Is that danger here, there? It's the antennas are all up for the dangers. And in the aware, we begin to expand that. And it's not that there's not dangerous situations or people who don't behave correctly in this world. There definitely are. But there's also a lot of good. And there's good people. And also we're aware of the feeling of God inside of us as a resource, as an asset, as a strength. And it balances our lives. We move into that balanced state. And that's a big step in evolution of consciousness. Yeah. So great. And it would be normal if we move into a new situation, we're a little bit more in a beware state than we are aware state, because it's new and we're not sure and what's going to happen here. But how nice it would be to more and more constantly live in that aware state. Great. Anyone else?
I've noticed with my own evolution in terms of projects and working with other people, and how my positive evolution that I've seen is being a witness and an observer to situations, persons, places, and things, and not taking them personally. And how huge that is after the amount of work and faith and trust in God and lots of conversations and lots of work to get to a place where almost, seeing it as God's play, but actually experiencing that and not a mental, well, this is God's play. It's actually an experience of it being God's play, and knowing that because my response is as an observer, as that's interesting information about this person, and not taking it personally and not feeling assaulted and things like that, that it's the experience of God as being everywhere equally present, and that my own personal evolution is not taking things personally and not living in that ego state of fear, shame, guilt, frustration, anger, resentment, bitterness, and living in those, living in that skin. So I've really noticed it a lot in the last couple of months in my working on these projects and on others' talks and dealing with different, situations and companies and all this kind of thing, and how I've, responded with them. And I feel very positive and feel like I have made an evolutionary jump. And it's great. It's great.
That concept of moving from personal to impersonal. And one of the things about our language and use of language, oftentimes the impersonal is translated to being cold, aloof, indifferent, terminology like that. So when you've experienced that impersonal, not taking things personally and moving into that more impersonal, how would you describe that? What kind of adjectives would you use with that? Versus cold, aloof.
I'm like probably more engaged. I'm listening. I'm a better listener. And I'm also able to get to the truth of what's really happening, as opposed to it being filtered by my own ego state. So I'm actually better and clear and cleaner with the truth. And that makes it a win-win for both the other, party, situation, and myself. Because when, in operating along that, it's always much easier, nicer, and when I walk away from it, I'm clean. And I have no stuff that's, going around in the merry-go-round and all that kind of stuff. I walk away from it because it's a clean interaction. And that's very different than being cold and don't care, because I do care, but I'm not in some kind of emotional highs and lows around all of that.
Krishna talks in the Gita about standing away from this world, being the observer of it, watching it. But he's also actively manifesting as this creation, as this world. So he's intimately connected with it, but there's a part of him who stands back and is separate and is the witness. He's always got a little smile on his face. It's always the pleasure. It's always, he sees it. And I think that's very definitely part of the evolutionary stuff for us, is that as we take that more personal point of view, we see the fun of it. have that kind of perspective.
Well, no, I do think it makes me more compassionate also.
Yes.
It's the difference. Being impersonal really has made me way more compassionate
Mm-hmm.
and understanding
Mm-hmm.
with other situations and things like that.
When we personalize it, it's inevitable, isn't it, that we're going to create a drama, but it's going to be run by our own narrative, our own thoughts around why is that person being that way, and we'll have ideas of why they're being that way, and most of them aren't nice, and but we don't really see the other person. We're filled with our own judgments, and we're filled with our own thoughts around it. And we don't really see them. When we step back, we can say, oh, that person's really struggling here. If you're standing in line waiting for a clerk to check you out, and they're just in a mood or whatever, and you personalize it and you get all upset about them, you don't see what's going on for them. You have no interest or knowledge about them. But when you're in that more impersonal state, you can see them. And what before may have been just irritating for you, you may have compassion for that person. Oh, I can see they're short-handed. This is the only place that's open here, and these others there's nobody manning that person, anybody there. And I have compassion for that. It's not their fault. Maybe, somebody didn't show up for work that way, or it's poor management or something else. And you can have compassion for that person then, instead of just being irritated. Yeah, great. Great descriptions.
I found that 2 months ago, it was quite pleasant as far as being on the Tron cycle type thing. It seemed to be on the top, and where this month it seemed to be much more on the bottom.
Yeah.
And so that was disappointing, but I guess that's part of life.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes life is harder. It's thicker. There's more that comes at us, and it's not entirely in our control. And when you think about being down in the trough rather than high up on the peak, on the wave, and you just think, okay, was that my doing, or was it just simply what life was bringing to my door that just made life more challenging, more difficult? How would you assess that? Was it a little combination of the two?
I think, a combination of the two. Not really liking what life brought to the door,
Mm-hmm.
and probably not processing it in the best fashion one could have done, and sort of slowly losing a grip on a closer relationship to God.
Uh-huh.
So that was disappointing.
And the fact that some challenging things were brought to your door, outside of your own control. True?
I would say so.
Yeah. So in reviewing it and looking back over it and thinking, okay, my evolutionary course, where I'm headed for, how I'd like to be with all of this. Can you see where, if I had it to do over again, knowing then what I know now, what would you do something differently?
Yes, I still participate in things that brought me closer to God before, but weren't getting results this time.
Yeah.
So I guess I did some of the coasting, but not the good kind.
Right. Ghosting usually denotes going downhill.
Yeah. It's already there.
Yeah. So that you would stay more steady on with your practice and the things that you know that work for you.
Yeah.
If you just imagine it, if you just recreate your experience in that way and just see yourself as doing that, somehow magically, little fairy dust sprinkled on top of you, you just knew it, knew to do that, and you allow that to unfold. So all the outer circumstances are the same, but your you're adhering more to your practice. You're not getting thrown off with it. And let that unfold in your mind. And just what do you notice as you see that unfolding in that new and different way?
Well, you wouldn't be held down as long or be down as long because you may not get results right away, but at least you're still depositing in the bank.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think what's in there is that life throws us some tough stuff sometimes. And it's not always in our control. What we do with it has consequences. And if we give it the power of attorney over our moods, over our happiness, and say the world gets to determine whether I'm happy or focused on God or not, and that kind of, we've given away too much. But when you say, come hell or high water, I'm sticking to the path. I'm sticking to what I know works for me. And I don't deviate, and I may go through a rough time here, but I know I'll come out of it sooner. Maybe I'll get a little less lost along the way. And you see yourself in that human evolution and just adhering to that. Saying, okay, lesson learned. Lesson learned. And I think that's something for me at one time that really kicked in. I can't allow somebody else to throw me off. This is my life. And if I give them that power, I've made a huge mistake. And it's never ending. The world will always throw something at me. Always. Sometimes we think, well, Jesus, Gandhi, they had it made, didn't they? They had easy lives. We know that that's not true. And there's a saying one time, the Buddha had his critics. He also had his critics. The world never relents in that way. And yet there's a part of us who secretly thinks that it should. If I'm on the spiritual path, if I'm making effort, people should treat me nicer. Life should go smoother, we think we've made a deal someplace. And when all the evidence shows that that's not true. And it's universal, it's true for all of us, and it's something we have to cure ourselves of at some point. That we have not made the deal. The deal is we keep our mind on God, we stay in the presence of God. It gives us greater strength, courage, comfort to get through those periods. But it doesn't mean those periods don't come. That's when my dad passed away, and my mom says, well, life is just not supposed to be this way. They're both in their 80s, and it's kind of like, that's pretty much how things run right now in this stage of evolution. Don't generally get a 150-year run, or this is kind of what happens. I knew what she meant, but it's there's that thing in our head that says we think we made a deal, and when we feel betrayed in the deal, it's hard. It's hard for us to take. We think God has betrayed us because we think we made the deal. Say, okay, this world does not get say over me. This world does not get say. If I give it say, there's no end to it. God's having way too much fun testing us along the way.
I'm glad to hear he was in the trough too. I thought I was by myself. I think the bottom line is, or I'm starting to discover all of a sudden that even though when you wrote a post once about doubt assailing you on the path, right away it's like, I have no doubt, none. But the bottom line is, if I didn't have any doubt, I'd have faith, period.
Right.
And that faith would have taken me already to my goal.
Yes.
And so now I'm demanding faith of
Yeah.
God.
And the removal of doubt. And we can reflect on ourselves and we say, well, in general, I have faith in God, and I think things, He's taking. But we get in the battleground, and it's suddenly, where'd that go to? Where'd that faith go to? I don't like this. I don't like how these people are treating me. I don't like this situation. I don't like how things are turning out here. Well, if we really think about it, we would know that that's doubt. That's doubting God's goodness. And that He's manifesting as this, and that there's something good behind it, ultimately. It can be that we turn more deeply to God when things don't go our way. And that's our test. So it's different for all of us, but that there's reason and purpose behind everything that comes. And I think in general, if we want to make a generalization, it all comes down to where's our attention at? Is it on God or is it on the outer circumstances? And if we allow, or it can be not necessarily just outer, it can be physical pain, it can be emotional pain, it can be things that we're experiencing inside. But if I really had perfect faith that this pain also came from God. And so I'll turn it over to you as you review the time. You think, okay, if I had that perfect faith, everything was unfolding perfectly, and God's hand, and I felt and saw that it's God's hand behind it all. How would that change you? Would it change you?
Oh, totally, 100%. To be able to observe, as Carlos said, instead of getting enmeshed.
Yeah. So then we can say, okay, that is doubt. That's playing in the background because I didn't have that experience. That's not how it went for me. And so when we make it, all right, that's me, that's on me. However anybody else was behaving in there, that part is on me. And that's what I want to take hold of. That's what I want to get a good grip on and really get determined. I want to have that perfect apprehension. This life is unfolding perfectly as God would will it, so that I can perfect my own consciousness.
The only way I'm going to get there is to sit and meditate. Period. Just to walk away. I have to take care of my spiritual life.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes one of the hardest things to do is to walk away from the drama. But that's not right. They don't understand. They didn't hear me. The list can go on forever of what they didn't get. But the essential thing is I'm not getting it. Because I've just subjected myself to hell.
And when if I had the faith, and the faith the size of a grain of mustard seed is faith.
Yeah.
To me, there's no level. You either have faith or you don't. I had faith, and if I have faith, I'll take care of the spiritual, and that will carry me through anything.
Great. Sounds like you have your marching orders.
Yep, I do.
That little tiny mustard seed can grow into a huge, huge tree. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? It can happen with a seed. Okay.
The task I assigned myself, what are your tasks to achieve, was to serve from a place of true love. And it was amazing how much work there was to be done when I could put myself into that mode. Of people just coming out of the woodwork and needing service from a place of love, and just
and not and having some very hard work to do, physical work to do, and things I hadn't signed up for, and but to just be able to just do it and enjoy it and be part of lots of different situations.
I don't know if you have words for it, but how would you describe true love?
It was interesting because I didn't, until I came back to it today, I didn't remember that it was the true love part. So the way I was thinking of it was just God's love as opposed to, and when we were talking about evolution earlier and looking at where you were and where you are and thinking about, 20 years ago, doing very similar things that looked very similar out of love. And it was, I want you to love me. If I do these things for you, you'll love me and I love you. And that give and take kind of thing. And this wanting to do things just to raise up the situation or the other people or just so that there's joy all around, not for any reward or not for any tangible, just that
there's no invisible tally sheet that goes, so if I do this, then you should give that.
And then it just kind of dissolves afterwards. The act or the one hand not knowing what the other hand's doing. So it just comes up and serve it and that there was the energy to do it. Even if I had signed up for it and said there's no way I'm gonna be able to do that. But there was plenty of energy and time and accomplish everything. All the things that
I think one of the things that's true for loving service is that the reward is built into the action itself. And we're not looking for a reaction to give us that reward. And that's a huge shift from the human scales that are the balance sheet that's up there. If I'm nice to you, then you should be nice to me. And there's this let's make a deal kind of thing going on. And I feel right, I feel good, I feel the presence of God in the service and doing this. The reward is already built in. And if you have gratitude, if there's something that's good happening for you and you acknowledge that, that's additional joy built into the program. But the joy is already there. And if there's no acknowledgement, even if there's a negative reaction, and I've done it and I feel that joy, I feel that perfection, I feel that rightness in doing it, that's exactly right. It's exactly where I want to be. So that the reward is built into the action itself. That's so freeing. So freeing. You think of all the different relationships we have in life and how there's this kind of invisible tally sheet that's constantly going on. And it's a tyrant. It's a tyrant. We feel bad, and we feel terrible, and we feel hurt. We feel angry because somebody's not acting the way we think that they ought to act, or have gratitude for what we've done, or anything else. And I go, I don't know where it all went to, but I feel exactly right about it. I feel at peace about it. I feel joy. Yes. And I can always check in if something difficult happens around that action, something unexpected, something I didn't think. I can check in. Okay, God, are we on good solid ground here? Does that feel right? Does that feel pure? And it's like, yes, it all does. And then we can just let it go. Just let it go. Great. Good lessons.
Mhm. Something else I think I was working on. It's gone.
True love.
Cool love.
For anybody who's seen Princess Bride.
Oh, overcoming fear. That was the other. And that Jude was talking about that faith and if I have faith that God's in charge of everything, then I can let go of fear. And so really trying to tap into that idea that, you know, you're in charge of these people. You love these people way before I ever did.
Yeah.
I don't see how this is going to resolve. I need to just see them filled with love, and you need to take care of things. Because every time I try and take care of things, it just makes it all much muddier.
I think one of the greatest gifts we can give to ourselves in our journey of, in our evolution towards God, is the resolution of fear. That fear no longer has, we might get startled, we might get surprised, there might be other things that happen, but living with that anxiety and that fear completely gone, how that changes our life so completely.
When I think about that with Adam and Eve, they were ashamed and they were afraid.
Yeah.
And with those of us two, you know,
Right at the core of what
Yeah.
separates us from walking in the garden with God.
that's nice.
Great. Did that answer your question? You said you had one when we started.
I did. That question was about, what is it? Intuition through concentration.
Uh-huh.
That's what I'm wondering about that.
It's the kind of concentration that we experience in meditation. When we become focused, let's say we're watching the breath, hamsa, watching the breath, and we allow our whole attention to become focused on the breath, on the ajna, and then we enter into that greater still state. And through that stillness, then intuition just comes to us, unbidden. Suddenly there will be some revelation, we understand something. Maybe we've struggled with it for a long time, and suddenly it's just there. It's not a product of the reasoning mind, the higher intellect of the buddhi, it's the illumined buddhi. And suddenly that light shines, and we're fully cognizant, we're fully aware. It's a whole experience that comes to us. So that concentration, if the opposite of that is to have a shotgun, kind of scatter our attentions here and here and here and here, very unlikely to get an intuitive experience when we're scattered all over the map. But we bring the attention in, we make it inwardly focused, we enter into that state of calm, and then intuition becomes a natural attribute. So I think in Master talking about concentration there, he's not talking about the way we would concentrate on trying to put a thread into a needle, or that kind of focus in that way. It's bringing the mind into that still state, calm still state. And it's from that then that intuition is a natural product. We're naturally intuitive beings. It's just many of us are just way too noisy in our heads to tune into that station. And all that static just makes it impossible. And put on that we're halfway afraid of our own intuition. What if it tells me to do something I'm not thrilled about doing? Might ask me to do something I'm not sure I want to go there. That's our fear. And so we know where not to go, what not to do. So we bring ourselves into that still state, that calm mind, and then suddenly we realize I'm an intuitive being. And it comes so naturally, we may not even ascribe that kind of word to it. It's just, we know in that moment. We know what we're going to do. We know what the right thing is. We know what the right direction is. We know what the right words are to say to a particular, we just know. How do we know? We just know. It just is. And that's our intuition at work. So having that attention, as Mother would say, put your mind on God. You know, bring your attention here to the ajna, to the breath, a calm state. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So shifting and new topic for the month. For the next month. The sun shines in the high heavens. Everything is fully awake. Awaken thou me likewise. Thou art invisible, yet thy energy flows through the rays of sunshine. Fill my veins with thine invisible rays, making me strong and tireless. As the sun shines in the busiest streets, may I behold thy rays, all protecting love in the crowded places of my life's activities. As the light shines steadily, undisturbed on the street, whether crowded or empty, so may I hold my calmness and my strength steadily while I move through the crowded or empty streets of life. Give me strength, and what I receive, teach me to share with others. Beautiful prayer there. Avoiding a mechanical or one-sided life. And this is something I think that we take vows around our time of Kriya and initiation to practice faithfully the things that we've been taught. And it's a good thing. It's a thing that we should adhere to. If we don't, it's just too easy to get swept off into the streams of worldly life and really lose sight of our whole spiritual life, our spiritual goals. And so it's important that we adhere to a discipline, that we are focused in that way. But what I like better than discipline even, I do like discipline, highly approve of it. However, what I like better is having a love affair with God. If you think about a time when you've been in love with somebody, you don't have to discipline yourself to think about that person. You cannot not think about them. And your mind is always being drawn to them like a magnet. So if somebody says, well, you have to think about that person, what? I do anyway. I could not do it. We have that kind of an attraction, that kind of feeling towards God, and it becomes alive, a live kind of thing. It's not dead. It's not just doing pro forma. It's not just doing it because. So we need to keep track of that in our spiritual lives. If it becomes something that we're just simply doing out of, well, this is something that I promised to do, and as we talked about tonight, there are peaks and valleys. There are ups and downs on the way up. And so there are times when that discipline really holds us in good stead, because high times, low times, we're constantly making investments. Those investments will return back to us. But we must be careful that we're not becoming mechanical in life. That we're not just doing things because, that they're alive. And the thing is not to stop doing things because they become mechanical. It's to find out, where did I miss the life? Where's the juice at here? What's going on that close myself down to what's really going on here. One time, one of the saints told Master, he says, don't mistaken the means for the goal. He says, you love to meditate. Remember, but meditation is taking you someplace. It's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And so we have to remind ourselves of that it's not just, oh, I've meditated today, therefore I fulfilled my function, good enough. Did I experience God? Master would say, I meditate until I make contact with God. Every time. Every time. And we do have schedules, we do have things in life that doesn't always allow us to necessarily dig down through all the debris until we get to that golden little nugget, that God contact down there. So there's some practical reality, but far too often we just simply put in our time. And we've not really made the effort to get, what is this all about? Did I feel the bliss of God? Did I feel the peace? Did I feel the joy? Am I alive to this? Or am I sleepwalking? Am I half dead with it? And that's what we have to challenge ourselves to be. And to take into account, well, sometimes are easier than other times, granted. So we're looking at trends here. We're looking at, if you start to get mechanical about things, you'll lose it. You may still be outwardly practicing, but you won't be inwardly alive. So this is a huge lesson, is to wake up, to not be sleepwalking, and just not be, well, you know, it's good enough. I'm not in active pain right now, so, you know, my spiritual life is okay, you know. I'm not down in the dumps, I'm not, you know, in total pain. And the mind is, well, one way to say it is it's lazy, another way to say it, it's efficient. And if it just sees an easier path and what it thinks of as an easier way to go, it'll choose that. It'll be like water. It'll just go down through the cracks that seems the easiest. So we need to check in with ourselves. Am I alive to this? Am I feeling God? Am I making that God contact? And if I'm not, I'm signing my own death warrant spiritually. There's only so much juice in life. And eventually something else will overshadow it, seem more important, more enticing, if I'm not making that steady contact, if I'm not going deeper, if I'm not soaring higher. It's just going to happen. Gravity takes over, and it'll pull us down. Because we'll always go to that default, and right now the human ego is the default. And our old habits and our old patterns, that's the default. When you have full God realization, that becomes your default. And you'd have to make a deliberate effort to not be God realized. Ananda Moyi Ma, who was born into life fully God realized, she deliberately put herself into a state of ignorance, and for 7 years she practiced sadhana. Number one is that she wanted to be the example of what others should follow. But she also put her in intimate touch with what people's problems were. Because she had it from the beginning. She just knew God from day one, from birth. And so there is a period of time this is a time to practice sadhana. And she deliberately put herself into a state of separation. That's something that an avatar can do. That's not a recommendation for most of us.
Yeah.
So this is an important topic in the sense that it's how we stay alive. And everybody goes through the desert. Everybody goes through times when it just feels dry. And it's difficult. And you're really struggling. But there's a certain aliveness in the struggle. You know that you're struggling. You know you're in the desert. You know that you're striving still. And then there's a time when it's not just a particular day we're coasting. You know, it becomes a pattern. It becomes something it's easier. It's a path of least resistance. And that's when we can get into trouble. And then suddenly we look around and, oh, that looks a little enticing, and that looks a little enticing, and the world gets a stronger and a stronger draw on us. And then suddenly, oh yeah, the spiritual path, that's something I used to do. Oh, you're still into that? Oh, that's kind of interesting. No, I moved on from that. It's one of those stages in my life. It happens too easily. So to not become mechanical, to enter into a higher state of concentration. And there is what Master calls super concentration. Now that doesn't mean wrinkling your eyebrows up and giving yourself a headache. That's not that kind of focused attention. You become absorbed. If you're thinking about the ajna, here at the point of between the eyebrows, or the sahasrara, the top of the head, and you become absorbed into that, that's a state of it goes beyond normal concentration. You merge into it. You feel absorbed in it. You feel absorbed into the presence of God. Your mind seems to come to a state of stillness. And you're really fully focused and aware of the presence of God in that moment. That's the superconscious concentration. That's going beyond thinking about something. And you become absorbed in it. You become merged in it. So think about that in terms of your meditation and your time that you're spending with God. Are you entering into that kind of state of absorption where you just feel merged into the peace of God, the bliss of God, the joy of God, the expansion of God? Until that becomes a part of who you are, you just feel yourself completely identified with that. And then you've entered into that state of super concentration. And so continuing on with Master, how to develop the power of super concentration. Now the question comes, how to develop the calm power of super concentration. Make up your mind that henceforth you will try to perform your interesting duties with whole heart, and uninteresting ones with deep attention. I once read a book by Eugene Herrigold, and it's called Zen and the Art of Archery. And he talked about meeting this archery Zen master who would become so focused on the bow, the arrow, releasing the arrow, and most of all the target. He's completely focused on that target. And he could hit bullseye after bullseye with that. He'd become proficient at it. And so the whole discipline was learning how to string the bow, how to pull it back. It's a really hard bow to pull back. Just pulling it back, becoming steady. The master was taking him through all these steps to where he could shoot an arrow like that. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting to practice just Zen and the art of whatever. Zen and the art of driving, Zen and the art of washing the dishes, Zen and the art of whatever it is that I might be doing. You become focused on all the minute details of doing a particular function, but you're aware of the muscles as they're moving, you're aware of tension in your body, you're aware of how you're standing, you're aware of what your surroundings are like. You become very, very focused on all of that. And you allow that to then become just a meditation for you. And just as you move and you're washing the dishes and you're just very hyper aware of everything you're doing as you're washing those dishes. And it puts you into a very, very, very calm state. a lovely state to be. Not a very interesting activity normally, but that is a lovely, lovely state of mind to do it. And you can do it with absolutely anything that you do in life. It doesn't have to be an interesting thing to do in that sense, in a worldly kind of sense, to make it completely absorbing in that super conscious state and super concentration. So then Master said, perform the most valuable, useful, and interesting duties of life, first in preference to uninteresting duties, and concentrate upon them until you are finished. Master talked a lot about finishing whatever he set out to do. Think about how most of us encounter frustrations in life. We start out to do something, doesn't go the way that we wanted it to go. People don't cooperate, things don't cooperate. It's just what happens. We get frustrated, we get anxious, we get angry. None of it is helpful, is it? And so you think about, all right, taking that full attention and just seeing the project, okay, now this isn't working correctly, and inviting God in and making him a participant in this. And what do I do now? There's a book by Tom Wolfe called The Right Stuff, and he's talking about the space program, but before the space program there were test pilots. And these test pilots would take up these experimental aircraft, and they would put them into rolls and dives and things that they knew caused accidents. Now, beforehand, the engineers had worked out what they thought might be the solutions to these things, but they didn't know. It's theory only. So they would have a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they would put it into a deliberate dive or roll, things like that they knew in the past had caused the plane to crash. Now, in all likelihood, if the plane crashes, they crash with the plane. That's it. No escape. And they would say, all right, I've done procedure number 1, did not work. Okay, I've done procedure number 2, not work. Meanwhile, they're going 800 miles an hour down towards the earth. And they would just calmly call out. And it's important that they called out each procedure because they would know that one didn't work, that one didn't work. And if they crashed and they died, they go, okay, well, let's start with number 8 then, because you got to number 7 and none of those work. Can you imagine having a job like that? Pretty crazy, but they loved it. So you just think, all right, God, that didn't work. Now, fortunately, most of these kinds of things that we're talking about, you're not going 800 miles an hour hurtling towards the earth. You just take the next step. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this. And let's try that. And God is the engineer who's feeding you ideas from behind. Giving yourself super conscious concentration while you're doing a project. It can be a very ordinary kind of thing. But in the past, rather than you may have gotten angry, frustrated, and so on, you tune into God, you keep going with it. Tried number 1, didn't work. Tried number 2, didn't work. Tried number 3, there's the solution. Maybe you've run out of ideas. Okay, God, I've done everything I know to do here. You must show me. You must show me. And somewhere deep inside, you open yourself to that super consciousness. Instead of getting angry, instead of getting frustrated, instead of getting ashamed, all those kinds of things that we can when things aren't working. We stay focused on God. What do I do now? Suddenly a thought pops in your mind. Okay, I'll try that. Number 8 on the list. So you work at life like that. You make God your partner. You remain in that super conscious, super concentrated status that makes you into alignment with divine consciousness. You don't take yourself offline when things don't go right. What a crazy thing to do. Our greatest asset, our greatest resource, God, and we go offline. Never mind. And we sign off. What a crazy thing to do. So we work on it. And we work on staying concentrated in that way and going about our business in that way. So there's a few more steps here, but I invite you to read them for yourself and to go through this month and think about ways that you can incorporate this super consciousness and this super concentration into everyday acts, things that you're doing all the time. I put the picture on the back here of Krishna and Radha because I liked how they were looking at each other. And I thought, what a nice imagery for super concentration. They're absorbed into each other's beings, and in this case, Radha represents the soul, Krishna represents the ultimate divine consciousness. And to think about going through your life with that kind of absorption in God, that kind of concentration on God.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
I do computer work a lot, and it takes my mind and concentration.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I incorporate this? You were saying muscles and physical, and a lot of it isn't that. So how can I create that so that becomes that way?
But your mind is also working on things as well. So you become very, very aware of, as an observer, what your mind is doing, how you're approaching a problem. And you're watching that with as much attention as you would muscular action.
Okay.
Oh, there's that thought. There's that thing to do. There's that idea. There's that inspiration. There's that. So you're creating all through it. And so you're watching your mind do that.
Okay. So that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think what you'll notice is that as you enter into it with that kind of awareness, you become much calmer. You're watching your own thoughts. Now, most of us think, well, I am my thoughts. But that's not true. Our essential being is beyond thought. So, as an observer of my thoughts, I have to take a step back from identification with those thoughts. And then suddenly I see, I have thoughts, but I am not those thoughts. That's a huge thing to enter into. When we see thoughts are constantly flying, I am not those thoughts. We enter into a state of calmness then. And in that state of calmness, I think the other things you'll find is you're a much better judge. Your intuition awakens. And you're a much better judge of what thoughts are worth keeping and what thoughts are not worth keeping.
Okay, you don't go down that path where that don't pick up that string.
Right.
Go back here.
Right.
Okay. So.
And you can be like those test pilots. All right. Try number 1. Let's move to maneuver number 2, and just
without the crash and burn.
That's right. That's right. You just have that calm attention, and just see how that affects productivity.
Yeah.
What I love is all these spiritual principles are eminently practical in the world. They make us better at what we do. Okay. Setting aside your books just for a minute. Just imagine that at the back of your head, there is a constant stream. It comes in through the base of your skull, comes into a very sensitive nerve plexus, where the spine joins the brain, the medulla oblongata. It's an upside down pyramid. And that intelligence, life energy, and light are all streaming in supplying you with everything that you need. Thought, intelligence, energy, light. And that as you put your attention at the base of the skull and feel that supply being given to you, that there's an ease, there's a flow that comes very naturally. There's a comfort that comes to you. And you breathe, and you open yourself to that. And then you see yourself being able to get up and move in this world. And it's an uninterrupted supply. But as you keep your attention right there, the supply keeps you going, day and night. There's no end to it. There's no limit to it. It's the greatest gift that you get in this life. And that the more you're consciously aware and attuned to it, the more dynamically it can flow. It gives you super concentrated attention. And it tunes you in with the super consciousness. That intelligence, that power that is beyond your own, and yet is intimately connected with you. And to never forget that gift. Don't leave home without it. Bow to the light within you. Continue your good practice. Walking in the footsteps of Star daily, without having to go to prison in order to do it.